Welcome to the creative extreme, where imagination without limitation is the only expectation.
Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of the Abbott and the Artista. I'm Christopher Ikpo, aka the Artista, with.
Stephon Thomas, aka the Abbot.
And
What's
so, yeah,
up?
we were just going back and forth, and I was like, we got to get this. We got
And
to get this in the pod because we weren't debating or arguing, but we were just having a great conversation. So, just finished watching the women's gold medal game at the Olympics for basketball, and I mean, barely squeaked it out. And we started talking about the men's game yesterday. My take is, and Steph made a great point. It's not 1992, right, where the dream team was playing against guys who were just getting into basketball. And I totally agree with that. I know that. My take is when you look at these two teams, right? If your home team was trotting out on the floor as their starting lineup, Steph Curry, Devin Booker, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Joel Embiid, and then the opposing team, the visiting team, trotted out Evan Fournier, Nicholas Batum, Rudy Gobert, who only plays one end of the floor, and then Wemby. Are you not expecting a victory, and not even a victory? Are you not expecting a decisive victory, not a 50-point win like the Dream Team over everybody back in '92, but a decisive win?
and
I'm expecting my team to go to work. I'm expecting Steph Curry, Book, KD, Bron, and Embiid to be putting in work. And then, since starters can't play the whole game, you got to go to the bench. You look at our bench compared to France's bench, like this shouldn't even be a conversation, right? But we all saw the game yesterday. If you didn't see
yet
the
here
game,
we are.
yeah,
Yet
here
here
we
we
are.
are.
Yeah, here we
Here we
are. It's
are.
mad. It was mad close. It took a Herculean all-time epic performance from Steph Curry, really in both games, in the semifinal and the
Yeah,
gold medal match, for us to come
yeah.
bring the
The
gold home.
semifinal is even tougher.
And so it doesn't make sense to me. Like I'm just
and
so yeah.
and
But
I'm watching the
you were
game.
saying
Yeah,
something. Go
I
ahead.
was
Yeah.
watching the game. I was watching the game, and I was like, at first it didn't make sense, but I'm sitting there trying to think to myself, it's like, wait a minute, what's so different? So I'm thinking of a few different things. I'm watching, and I think for me, it looked like that the NBA is a much more finesse game. It looks like the international game is a lot more rugged. It's a lot more, they let a lot more fouls go. It's a little bit more, there's more bumping, there's more pushing. And I think no matter who you are, that's going to make it harder to score and that's going to make it harder to play through. So, as we were talking about this, and now you got us recording it, so I was thinking about this, right? First of all, the NCAA tournament, right? The
Yeah.
amount of double digit teams that have upset single digit team seeds has been astronomical over the last few
Yeah.
years, right? You've
Yeah.
got 16s upsetting ones and 15s upsetting twos. It's like it's not even considered an upset anymore. It's like, oh yeah, ooh, I don't know who's going to win between 14 and 3. It's a coin toss. It's like it's never
Yeah.
like that before.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's like that. Like I can't tell, but that's kind of what it's seen the same thing. And not only that, if you like you've done this, and this is relevant for all of y'all who don't know, because Chris and I both played ball in college. We played ball together. You know, if you, I think we told the story on episode one or something.
Yeah.
We played basketball together, and but we've been playing basketball. We played basketball like all our lives leading up to that, and even a little bit after that, right? You know, you've walked onto the court with your boys who are dope. It's like, yo, we got this, right? We're gonna do this. You're looking at these other cats and they look like football players, right? And then when you get into the game, they also play like football players. And now you're like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? It's like you're trying to hit a shot, and this dude is he's not running you off your spot, he's throwing you off your spot. And you're like, and that makes it a lot harder to make shots. And all of a sudden, you're in this dogfight with these awkward football players, and you're like, yo, we're supposed to be blowing these cats out. And that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, they are bumping them. They are like, especially Serbia was just like looked like it was looked like it looked like rugby out there sometimes.
So you're
Like,
saying the
so
physicality you think is different, and that's what levels the playing field more on the international level.
Yeah, I mean, along with the skill, like there's a skill, skill is up. I mean,
Yeah, for
again,
sure. Yeah, yeah.
even with like like you said, with how many times, even if you have a Rudy Gobert who only plays one end of the court, how many of the players on our dream on our U.S. men's team plays against 2 7-footers in a lineup at the same time? It's just a little bit different, right? Like even if Rudy Gobert and even if Rudy Gobert is like plays one end of the court and Victor Wembanyama is like 7 years old, there's still like 2 7-footers that's going to make things just a little bit harder there in the
Yeah.
paint, right?
No, for sure.
And so I don't know. Like I too, like I was trying to figure it out. I was like, why is this so close? Why is it so hard?
It shouldn't be. And you know what? So that was a great point. And you know, and this is kind of sidetracking a little bit, but this makes me think of
Yeah.
whole debate, right? Like which era is better, the old school era,
Mm.
right? Like the 90s, early
Which, as
2000s.
you know, I hate those debates, but
Right,
yeah.
right. You hate those debates or now. And people are
Yeah.
always like, oh no, like, doesn't matter what era, da 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 da. Like the players today are way more skilled and are way better. If physicality truly affects the players of today that much, then that settles that debate.
Mm.
There's no
Well,
way that most of these cats could play back then. They would be average players at best. If that's true, they would be average
good.
players at
That's
with the
that's a
exception
good
of a
point.
LeBron, with the exception of a Curry, with the exception of a KD, these all-time Hall of Fame,
They would have figured
great
it out,
players.
but I
They would have had to
agree
have
that
adapted, right?
they would have had to adapt.
Okay,
Yep. Hmm.
you know the Olympics are coming. If you know it's going to be more physical, you've had 4 years to prepare. And for a lot of these guys, it wasn't their first Olympics. They've been playing in the Olympic. This is their third, fourth, Olympic Games. Is this Bron's
Hmm.
fifth? I think this was Bron's fifth Olympic Games, right?
Yeah.
He came in '03 and then played in '04. So I'm saying you've
Hmm.
had 20 years, 12 to 20
But
years
here's
to adapt, and you still can't figure out, okay, we're going overseas. It's going to be more physical. We're going to have to adapt how we play. We're going to have to get used to it. You know what I'm saying?
but
It's
but
more than
it's
just,
hard.
it's the mentality. Like, I don't think most of them don't have that mentality. Like, they don't have that dog in them. Like, I was watching that gold medal game. There are only a few cats, maybe 3 or 4, that got that dog in them, in my opinion.
Sure.
Curry
Yeah.
got that dog in him. We saw that. You know,
Mhm.
Bron's got that dog in him. He's gonna get after it, right? KD's got that dog in him. I know you don't like KD, but that dog in him,
Katie
right?
showed something.
And then Ant-Man, Anthony Edwards, he's
Mhm.
got that dog in him. Everybody else is an extremely highly skilled, great player, but I don't think they got that dog in them like that. Not like that.
I mean,
So I think
I
those
think
guys,
also
you transplant those guys back into the '90s, back into the early 2000s,
they'll be fun.
they'll
Mhm.
still be the same player, like playing on the same level. The other guys, I don't know, man. There's a big question mark surrounding that for me. So
Yeah,
that's if the
yeah,
physicality really is
yeah.
affecting the game that much.
But I think it also is like it's hard to. It's like it's been 4 years, so it's also been you know over 300 games of playing that style. It's like to it takes a while to adapt. I mean, they only played like 7 games this in the Olympics. So I think if you put some of those guys and have them play in Europe for like a year, which is why some of these guys who get out of the NBA, then go overseas and play for a little while, and then make it back into the NBA. It's kind of like
Mhm.
in like in like in like pro wrestling. Sorry, this is so such a tangent. But in like pro wrestling, you have these guys and gals who they start out learning in the US. They don't really make it that far. They don't make it up to like the WWE. And then they go to Japan for like 3 years and
Yeah.
they just get their butts whooped. Like just it's just
Mhm.
completely different kind of intensity. And then they come back and they're better wrestlers because they got themselves beat
Yeah.
up on for a few years. So I think there's some of that. I do think that you're right though, that it's not quite like you don't need to have as much dog in the NBA
No.
that you may be used to. Like you don't have and part of that is they've legislated some of that out, because they didn't want another Jordan rules, you know, that wasn't cool. Like that wasn't, you
Well,
know.
Mike overcame, and that's part of the
But
lore.
that wasn't basketball. What the Detroit
No,
Pistons did to
no,
Mike wasn't
but see, okay,
basketball.
so going back to the football players, right? And football players watching this are probably going to hate us for they're going to have a lot to say about this. But everybody who hoops knows football players have a very particular style of playing the game of basketball, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Well, let's say the vast majority. There's a few
yeah,
that can cross over that can play at a very, very high
absolutely,
level on both ends. But
absolutely.
every time, so we both went through it. I mean, I know I definitely went through it my whole entire life. Football player talking trash. You ain't all that. You the man on your hoop squad, but I'm playing for you. Lucky I'm playing football and and all this and all that. And I would always just be like, look, there's thousands of courts all over the place. There's nothing but time and opportunity, man. Space, time, and opportunity. Like whenever you want to play, we'll play. And every single time I played a football player, I trounced him. It wasn't even close. I'm yelling T-Mac from 30 feet away, and it's bottoms every single time. You know what I'm saying? So in one particular story, and this, I hate to sound like I'm bigging myself up, right? But there was a football player. This was in college. There was a football player who was same thing. You ain't all that, whatever. And it's never malicious, right? It's never like,
Yes,
I hate you and
trash
I don't
talk.
believe
Yeah,
in you
just
and you're a
trash
guy. I can't stay. It's always playful, right? But it was the same kind of thing. And he was in the gym one day. Hoop practice got finished. He was shooting around, and it was that, yeah, you don't want to see me, da 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 da. And I just got done doing a full practice, right? Hard practice. He's just shooting around. He's fresh. I'm like, ain't nobody else here but me and you. We can do it right now. All right, let's go. Check up. Ran him off the floor. And it wasn't all post up. It wasn't, because I'm bigger and I'm taller, so I was posting up and shoot. No, it was none of that. It was off the dribble. It was threes, mid-range, drive, step back. It was the whole package, right? After we get done playing, he looks at me, he goes, first of all, we're not going to tell nobody about this. And secondly, he was like, dude, man, he's like, I don't get it. He's like, why aren't you playing? Because I wasn't playing. I was a freshman. My coach at the time had this policy is you freshmen don't play. Only upperclassmen play, right? So I was riding the bench my freshman year. And I was like, I can't tell you. I can't tell you. I'm not saying I was the man. I was the best player on the team, and I should have been getting the most minutes at that time, as an incoming freshman. But I definitely deserved some tick. I needed some, but I didn't get it, right? But see, so this is my thing. It's like you have different styles of play. If you got it in you, it doesn't matter what court you step on and who you're playing against. You got it in you, right? When we would play pickup games in college, like there was one time I remember I went in during lunch and Pastor Knight was playing. Shout out to James Knight, Pastor Knight. He was playing, right? Playing playing against a bunch of savvy, grown men, right? So it wasn't just like it was some bums. It was Joe from, accounting and Bob from the mechanic shop who never played ball. Like they're ball players. Me and James get on the same team, and we're just taking turns, going down, back and forth, switches. All right, you go. All right, now I'm going to go. Now you go. Now I'm going to go, right? It was crazy. It didn't matter who we were playing against. It didn't matter. They were playing more physical because athletically they couldn't keep up with us. They were trying to push us. They were trying to rough us up. They were trying to body us. You're not doing that, man. Not against two Chicago kids. Like, first of all, yeah, definitely not against two Chicago kids. And secondly, you ain't doing that to us. So my point is, it doesn't matter what style of play, where you're at or who you're playing against. If you got it in you, you got it in you. And then if you're of a certain talent level, it also shouldn't matter. When Kobe went to the Rucker, it didn't matter that they were playing street ball. It was more physical. It wasn't a structured, organized game like in college or in the NBA. Kobe had that dog in him, the most elite dogs in him, right? And he had the supreme skill level. So he went out on Rucker and showed out. He was on the NBA court showing out. Kobe gets to the Olympics. he runs through Paul Gasol and puts him on his ass to set the tone at the Olympics show out. This is what I'm saying, man. You know?
Well, the dog. Well, to your point, the dog like you're talking about is still unique. That still sets certain that still sets a lot of players apart, like who become the most elite, right? Like
Yeah,
there's going to be a
yeah,
lot of great players, but that's a good
yeah,
point that you make. Is that like certain players have that dog, and maybe less of our players on balance this year have that dog. Like you said, they're still extremely skilled. They're
yeah,
great. They want to win, but they don't necessarily have that kind of, because that's kind of an innate thing, right? It's like
yeah.
it's not something
Either you
necessarily
got it or you
developed.
don't. Yeah, you can't teach
But
it.
my last point, though, will be going back to the other teams in the world. They also spend 4 years just strategizing against the US. They spend 4 years just strategizing.
Yeah.
What can we do to give ourselves a better chance against the U.S.? The U.S. is the hunted, so the
Mhm.
U.S. gets their best shot every time. All the other games they play against each other in the pool rounds, and then even in their leagues across the world, they are all with one goal. If we get a shot at the US, what do we do to compete? So the
Right.
US is also getting everybody's
Best shot.
absolute best shot,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
but it's
No, that's a great point.
it's
That is a
funny.
great point. That's
Yeah.
going to make every game they play tougher than just the normal game.
The
Yeah, so that's
intensity is
yeah,
higher.
yeah. I mean, I don't know, man. I look at the two sides, and and then it's like we got Coach Steve Kerr, we got
Hmm.
Ty Lue and Eric Spoelstra. We got three of the best head coaches, right? Probably three
Yeah.
of the best basketball minds
Hmm.
in the game globally, and we
Yeah.
still can't. We got all the money and the resources, and we still can't. At least we're not winning by 10, 15. Like it's Steph
I
Curry
don't know.
going left
Yeah.
behind the back double team, shooting from the hip pocket, fadeaway three. Like that's how we have to win the gold medal. Like I just
First
don't
foot.
think you should be that close. But also on the women's side, I really didn't expect this game to be that close because they've been washing everybody
Yeah, yeah, that's
and they
wild.
barely pulled it. So, they
That's
always say that the world's catching up and everything and da 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 da. But I also kind of transition now into right creative extreme.
yeah, because we're gonna have to get this
Yeah,
on the team bandwagon podcast. That's gonna be coming back one day. So
yeah,
we'll
we
talk
got
about.
yeah. We'll save the rest for the team
We'll
bandwagon
say
podcast. Shout out to Jamal, team bandwagon. Um,
that.
But yeah, so to kind of cross over, right? You had said something. You were like, some of these cats, wrestlers, they'll go over to Japan to get their skills up, right? And it's a whole different level of wrestling over there. And then they come back, and then it clicks over here. You and I have often talked about, we might be those creators of that company that needs to blow up elsewhere, right? Then once we take off elsewhere, then it picks up fire here. Like Hendrix had to go over to the UK, he had to go over to England to blow up. And then he came back here and became the god of, all guitar players and one of the greatest, musicians and artists of all time. Um, that made me think of that. And again, so I say all that to say, we're getting real close to something very exciting that we're going to be debuting to everybody
Mm.
in our Trinity universe, and characters and stories are going to start coming out, and we're just really excited about that. So stay tuned. Please keep your eye glued to social media, our website. Keep tuning into the pod. You're going to be getting more on that front, but diving back into where we left off after episode 4, we're in the month of April, and I think we got through the African characters in the month of
Hmm.
April, and then we were transitioning kind of into um, the
Yeah.
rest of April, which was, I think there was that small spot, like, so mixed line. Like she's
Yeah.
kind of that buffer in between the African
Right.
heroes and the Diamond Alliance and the space and Noble and Fata
Mhm.
Morgana and all that stuff
Right.
going into the next part. So Miquelon is another one of our, and this is why we say April is so dense. It's just it's a crazy month because so many of our top properties, fan favorites, properties we've developed, we have feature length screenplays for, scripts per series for. They're tied to April or they are in April. Miquelon is one of those characters. Dr. Lucia Yanez, she's of Aztec descent. Her and her older brother Tanakh, and she's known as La Bruja, or the witch. And she comes from a long line of Bruja who are their bloodline is infused with an ability to essentially master spirits, magic, magical energies, and be able to utilize artifacts in order to gain special abilities and to do miraculous, crazy, powerful things. And we mentioned that she had was the one who brought Frequency back from zombie mode back to life as a human, and so he was able to reunite with his family, and then he had to go to court. The whole thing, we talked about that last time, right? So after Miquelon, we move into General Hank Garrison. General Hank Garrison is essentially he's the handler, right? He's the person who manages the Alpha Initiative. Lieutenant General Richard Bonds, 5-star general, the whole nine. And he meets with Lou because after Noble's disappearance, Lou is going to have to step up, right? And so Lou is like, it's time for us to really implement what Noble's been trying to do all this time, which is recruit other heroes. We come together because not only do we, think something's coming, but we also still got our hands full just with, the way things are today, right? The status quo. All these people with powers all over the place. Chaos is breaking out. We got hyper villains. We need to put together a team to start regulating some of this. And so Lou sets out on his mission to find other heroes and kind of build this coalition, right? Build this Avengers, build this Justice League. I think really more like Justice League, like just a giant coalition of heroes and hypers to all work together. And he gets to Kid Jen. Now, Kid Jen is one of my personal favorite stories, a brainchild of Steph's, because he's a wild boy. Kid Jen's a wild boy. So Steph, talk about Kid Jen and just where that came from, and because I remember reading that profile for the first time and just like laughing and just being like, yo, this cat's bugging. Kid Jen is bugging. So talk about that character.
Ay, ay, ay. Kid Jen is he was he was he was he was born a rich kid. He was born with a platinum spoon in his mouth. He was born with a platinum spoon in his mouth, and he was just like from the minute from the from the minute he how do I say this? From the minute he could walk and talk, everyone knew he was a problem. He was just
He's a
he was
menace.
ornery. He was an a-hole. He was spoiled. He wanted everything for him. But he didn't. He was selfish. He had no regard for other people. His parents were extremely wealthy, and they gave him the things that you can give your child when you have a lot of money.
Yeah.
But even that wasn't enough for him. He wanted more. He wanted more, 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 more. So he looks around and he sees people as he gets a little older. He looks around and he sees people with hyper abilities. And I think his one natural hyper ability is that he can regenerate, hence the
Yeah.
name Kid Jin. He can take injury similar to Wolverine. He can take injury. He can take damage and and regenerate.
Yeah.
So Kid Jin. Um, And he doesn't like the fact that that's his only power. He's like, dude, this is terrible. Like, I don't want to. So what? I can regenerate. Like, I want to be able to fly and have super strength and eye lasers. He wants to have all the things that he sees other heroes with.
Yeah.
So he begins to uh, pretty much manufacture the rest of his like abilities. He's like Bruce Wayne on all like just to the extreme level. He's like, I'm going to use all this money I have to make myself into a superhero, into a hyper being. And he's just using all the money. As he gets older, he's just creating all these gadgets and making himself to be the superhero. The only problem is he's an a-hole. He's a terrible human being. You know, so that doesn't make for a great hero. You know, he wants to be respected as a hero. And I'm not talking about he's, you know, a jerk like the Punisher is a jerk, or, you know, how you know, some of these anti-heroes, they're still heroic, but they're a little bit rough around the edges and don't get along with others. No. This dude is just a terrible person through and through, but he wants to be a hero. So there's a dichotomy there. And he just continues, he continues to do his thing. It's just a horrible person. It's just using all, and at the time we meet him, he's still a teenager.
Yeah.
He's in that Peter Parker age range,
Right.
kid, still high school age. I don't know if he's in high school. I don't know if even
He's like, you know, 17, 18, right on that.
Yeah,
one.
like 17, 18, yeah, a little bit that cusp. But yeah. Anyway, so as Lieutenant Richard Bonds is out there recruiting heroes to join his squad, he runs up against, not runs up against, but he finds himself having a conversation with Kid Jin.
Because he runs into ecstasy, right? I think Bonds runs into ecstasy.
Yeah. Bonds runs into ecstasy, right?
And
Yeah,
he's
because
talking
ecstasy
to
comes next.
ecstasy and I think Kid Jen pops up. Right? He pops up and he inserts himself into their interaction and
yeah, what was it? He had what was it for
because I know Lou went to find Lou was out, finds ecstasy. They're
ecstasy,
talking, and he's telling her like, "Yo, I'm trying to get this thing going, da 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 da, whatever."
And she's like, "I got a few people you could talk to."
It pops in and starts talking trash, being brash, and just offending both Lou and ecstasy, right? And it doesn't go well for him at that point.
No, it doesn't matter how much he can regenerate. Lou gives him the hands.
Unprompted too. It wasn't like Lou just, you know, suckered him, you know, sucker punched him or whatever. Like Kid Jen,
he was trying to avoid it. He was
action.
like, "Come on, dude, like chill out." You know?
Kid Jen pressed the action, and he found out the hard way.
Yeah, that Lou was not the one. So, Kid Jin he's a fun character who, man, when we really dive into developing stories we can have with him, that's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be a lot of fun.
That's gonna be a lot of fun. Yeah. So, and then speaking of ecstasy, so ecstasy, it was interesting because her name, so she kind of went back with, and we didn't like it's, you know, we're gonna have to go back into these earlier months because as we were starting the podcast, we kind of brushed over some interesting characters and we touched on them and talked about them and we've been posting them on our social. But ecstasy, yeah. So we had ecstasy, who I was thinking I was we when we first started the pod, we went through January and we were just trying to get our feet wet. So we didn't talk in detail about as many of the characters. So we'll have to go back to that or we can touch on that here and there. But in January, there was a crew, Spliff's crew. You know, we've been posting a little bit about it on our website, on our socials. And Spliff was the leader of the King Project's crew. And they and they were narcotics dealers, illegal substances, and the name and the crew, all of their code names or what was it, aliases,
Yeah.
were all based on slang names uh, for narcotics. So you had spliff, you had blunt, you had Lala, um,
Yayo,
uh, Yayo, yeah, just
Paradise.
Paradise, just and then there was also this character named Ecstasy who never really got in with their crew. She was a little bit she was on a little bit of a different, but her name kind of came from there. And she's a telepath and a telekinetic character. She used to be a beauty queen, um, and she eventually started using her telekinetic powers, which she can move things with her mind, to use that to become trained in small arms. So she could shoot, but she can also use her mind to like make bullets kind of do different things in as they were in motion or as they were in the trajectory of them. Kind of like that movie Wanted. I think I had
Yeah.
probably seen that movie at the
James
time where they could,
McAvoy, Angelina Jolie, Morgan Freeman.
yeah, where they
Yeah,
can
yeah.
make bullets bend, you know. So, um, so yeah, she was so her story, and so you had that, but she also had this story where I believe she was a beauty queen and she had gotten really, when she kind of discovered how beauty pageants in general work behind the scenes. I think nowadays, generally speaking, beauty pageants have always been controversial, of course.
Yeah.
But I think nowadays, outside of the fact that external beauty still seems to be the most important thing in these contests, or external traditional external beauty, or whatever that means, conventional external beauty. um they've gotten a little bit better as far as not being just completely sexualized and demeaning to women. They've gotten a
Yeah.
little bit better, but anyone with, you know, and I actually know a couple of women who are involved in these pageants,
Mhm.
and you know they speak very highly of the community aspect and different things of that nature, where they are trying to empower more women than just the ones that look like beauty queens.
Right.
You know, so they're really trying to do that, and I don't know how successful they are at it, you know, um but back in the day, for the first however many decades of beauty pageants, we know that, I mean, I would think anyone who's being intellectually honest with themselves would know that would recognize what these beauty pageants were, and what they were for,
Yeah.
and that they were not very respectful to women as a whole, and definitely not to the women who were involved in it.
Yeah.
And Ecstasy, being a former beauty pageant who was very much into it and thought that, yes, I'm doing something, that yes, I'm showing my beauty, but I'm also becoming this, you know, this full, well-rounded woman who can show other women that they can achieve. He found that the beauty pageant circuit that she was in was straight corrupt,
Yeah.
and women were being abused, and women were being, you know, taken advantage of, and women were being very much the standards that the beauty pageant was espousing, and the ideals that the beauty pageant leaders were espousing, were completely opposite from what they were actually doing to these women.
Yeah.
So Ecstasy became this vigilante to kind of out these things and to bring down some of the more underlying evil elements that were on the verge of, if not totally into the realm of supervillainy. And she's like, I'm gonna help, you know, liberate some of these women. I'm gonna help bring these very evil elements of this community that I love to justice.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of her story when she meets up with Lieutenant Richard Bonds.
Yep. Yep. And so she, ultimately decides not to be a part of the team. Kid Jen maybe it might have had a part to do that with making that whole conversation or interaction awkward at best and just tragic at
Oh,
worst.
oh, I was just looking at another part of the sorry, I was just looking at another part of the of a profile, and she's a telekinetic, and her and she had been captured, and they had a team of scientists had harvested telekinetic telekinetic brain cells from her. I had
Mm,
forgot about that part of her because that's an underlying story of our entire universe is that people with telepathic and telekinetic abilities are highly sought after because we have this tech company that can harvest that is creating all kinds of next generation tech like AI tech that is truly predictive, but they're not using large language models. They're using telepathic and telekinetic brain cells and
right.
from these beings with these powers, which is in our world, in most worlds, those are generally less ubiquitous powers. Like there's not as many telepaths out there. They're unique. They're on a little bit of a higher plane, right?
Yeah.
Telepath and telekinetics. So when you find one and you think that you can use their abilities to help your tech, you're gonna seek them out. And XTC was a victim of that.
Yeah.
So
And universal intelligence
mhm.
harvesting these brain cells from these telepaths and these telekinetics often leads to the subject dying. So Ecstasy
Right,
was extremely lucky, blessed, whatever you want to say, that she
to
made it
make
out
it out.
alive intact, and not just made it out alive, but intact enough to the point where she still had some abilities and she could still function normally. Um, because universal intelligence is creating a whole new level, like Steph said, of technology, but it's biotech, right?
Right.
The
Hmm.
backbone of their technology, their next gen stuff is all biotech. It's not just advanced AI or, like you said,
Right.
the LLMs have increased our ability, our AI's ability to do. It's like, no, we have biotech global servers that are
Yeah.
powering this AI to do things that nobody's ever even dreamed of before. Obviously, all in the name of profit, but as we find out later on, in the name of something else as well. Um,
Right.
so after Ecstasy, we get into a character who is essentially the last, I think, piece or the final the final profile before we get into another mega story. But her name is Toki Mizushima, and Toki grew up in New Japan. New Japan is one of the districts within Platinum City. Once Platinum City came together, New Japan quickly formed, became one of the most populous districts within all of Platinum City. Also, one of the most prosperous districts within Platinum City. But it was not without its problems. Obviously, there were the lower income, lower middle class income areas, underprivileged, underserved areas within New Japan as well. But New Japan overall actually had more people in it than the country of Japan. So people kind of saw it as being a whole new or second home, essentially, for the Japanese. And Toki grew up there, very humble beginnings, grew up with her father, who was a very skilled weapons maker. Think of Hattori Hanzo from the Kill Bill,
Mhm.
saga, but also ran a local grocery store, I believe it was. And so Toki would be in the grocery store after school, on the weekends with her family and everything. Um, and one day while working, she had a sword that her father had made for her especially, and she was taking a break and kind of out back and just wielding it and whatever. And she happened to be a rare individual who had an occurrence or a run-in with one of the Iga clan, the historic ninja clan who migrated from New Japan or from Japan, the old world, over to New Japan, um, and set up shop there to do their thing. And the ninja obviously was very enamored with the weapon that Toki had, and that kind of led to her eyes opening about the rest of the world around her, right? Living this very kind of humble but sheltered life. Now she has this run-in. They offer her $100,000. The next time somebody showed up to the grocery store with $100,000 cash in a suitcase, was like, we want that sword, whatever, right? Fast forward a little bit, she graduates, she grows up, she's super smart, super intelligent, and she wants to do things to lift her family up, as well as be able to give back to the community. She gets a very prestigious job over at Lockhart Holdings. Now, if you can, if you can guess, Lockhart Holdings is closely affiliated with Universal Intelligence, and it is owned and run by the wealthiest man in the world, also arguably the most diabolical man in the world, Edgar Lockhart. We were introduced to him early on in January, I believe, and while she's there, she begins to uncover things. Secrets that the rest of the world has absolutely no idea about. One of those being the illegal experimentation on hypers with telekinetic and telepathic abilities, right? Like we just talked about with ecstasy. She's not down for it. She's not having it. And then she also learns that Edgar Lockhart was very likely behind the death of two very prominent individuals in New Japan, and the Miyamoto family. The patriarch of this family was the owner of a hedge fund, financial / tech global conglomerate. And what is it? What was the name? It was AAI was the abbreviation. Ando Associates Incorporated.
Yeah.
And they mysteriously died in a car accident, right? A car crash. Nobody knew how it happened, cold case, that whole thing. She finds out, yeah, Edgar was behind it. So she can't have that, obviously. The two people who died were very, very, very invested in the community, giving back, education, wealth, wellness, investing in different organizations and building, different things for the community, the whole nine, right? Just great, great, great people. So Toki leaves and she goes to join the Ando Associates Incorporated, who is now run by Iori Miyamoto, who we also met in January, who goes by the name of Musashi, the super samurai, the hyper being superhero for New Japan, and ends up quickly rising through the ranks. At this time, Edgar Lockhart is trying to perform a hostile takeover of Ando Associates, trying to steal Iori's family legacy, as well as business away from him. But Toki's, valuable insight into how Lockhart Holdings works and how Edgar Lockhart thinks and works comes in play because she's able to help Iori stave off the hostile takeover and helps Iori keep his company. That very profile, though, is what leads to Lou eventually running into Musashi, which eventually will kick off a giant storyline later. But again, that's later, because what we're about to get into now is something on a whole other level. And I just want to talk about the high level because we can't get into everything.
Well, before we even get into that, though, there's a couple of profiles between there, though, because there's another short saga with the Iga clan in the Tyler Durden. Oh, no, sorry. The Tilda Durden.
Yeah.
A little short thing in there.
Yeah.
With Tilda. Yeah. With
Tilda Durden.
With the hyperhuman fight club. The hyperhuman fight club.
Yeah, we have Yori Shizumu, who is a childhood friend of Iori, very, very close friend, right hand to Iori. And so high level, Yori grows up in an orphanage with her brother, and very, very tragic story. She ends up witnessing a lot of just horrible things throughout her life along with her brother. They end up in an orphanage together. And you know what's crazy about this? I remember writing this profile and reading it and it just making it me emotional. Again, not to big up myself, but her story, I feel like, is very, it's a deep one. But she ends up in this orphanage. And as anybody knows how the system works, the older you get, the significantly less chance or lower chance you have of being adopted out to a family, right? Families mostly want to go for newborn babies, infants, toddlers, young kids. They don't want to take in teenagers because oftentimes they believe that will come with problems and issues and all this other stuff. So Yodi and her brother getting older, very, very, very unlikely they're going to get adopted out. And somebody comes by the orphanage one day by the name of Iori Miyamoto, billionaire businessman, Musashi, who's also Musashi. And he ends up adopting Yori. But at the same time, she doesn't want to go because she believes she's going to be separated from her brother. And that's the only family she has. But he's like, no, he's coming too. Let's go. So they both end up getting to go. And they both end up being able to live with Iori and be trained by Iori and also be able to be employed by his global conglomerate. So their life gets changed essentially overnight. Again, that's a very high level overview.
Yeah.
You gotta read the profile to get all the emotional beats and notes and everything that go along with it. But then that leads us to Tilda Durden. So for all the Fight Club fans out there, this was an homage to Tyler Durden, Brad Pitt's character. And Tilda runs an underground, like Steph said, underground hyper being fight club where people will go and bet on unsanctioned, illegal, full contact matches where hyper beings are able to compete because hypers can't compete in, professional boxing, in professional MMA. They can't compete in these sports and these fighting sports and these combat sports because it's an unfair advantage, right? I mean, a hyper ability is essentially juicing to the 1 millionth power. It does not equate any way for a fair competition. But they also can't get sanctioned. So Tilda says, you know what? I'm just gonna make my own league. So she starts her own league. What was the name of the league?
It was the UFL. I just looked at it. It was the United. It was what was it? Underground League of Fighters.
The ULF, Underground League of Fighters.
And she was, or ULF, and she was, and actually she took over. There was like a kind of a very loosely unorganized one going on, and she came in and took it over and made it the big thing.
As most queens do in life, they get their hand has a ton of potential and isn't working, and they're able to form it into something that's a monster success. So and her hyper ability is she can instantaneously change the density and the weight of every part of her body. So she can either become very, very strong and incredibly durable, or she can make herself extremely fast and light in the blink of an eye. Which, if you're a trained fighter, you can imagine how that would greatly give you a great advantage in any type of altercation or fight. So she ends up becoming a famous underground fighter herself, comes across a smaller league, turns it into the ULF. The ULF, huge hit. Some of the ULF alums include Blunt from Spliff's crew in the King Projects, who was a heavy hitter and I'd say one of the grand champions of the ULF for quite some time. But other members of the ULF who were notable were some members of the Iga clan, which was extremely forbidden by Grandmaster Danzo for any of his ninja to be engaging in combat for profit out there in the streets. You can imagine a ninja's whole thing is being secret and covert, low-key, not being seen, not being heard, none of that stuff. And putting yourself on Front Street in the ULF just really flies in the face of that. So we get into a couple of profiles of some members of the Iga clan, their involvement in in the ULF, but also Lou ends up coming across them because he's looking for talent. He's looking to recruit. And as he was talking with Musashi, he ends up learning about the Iga clan, starts looking into it some more, comes across Chiyo, comes across Tomo, comes across Hideki, and that leads him to not investigating, but linking up with the Iga clan to see if they're willing to join this coalition of heroes and hypers he's looking to put together. So yeah, Seth, thank you for reminding me. I forgot those few profiles. But that leads us into one of my personal favorite stories, arcs. And again, we're just going to touch on it very high level because we can't get into the whole thing right now. And it definitely deserves its own pod. It is one of our top 10, I would say, IPs. Yeah. One that's gotten a lot of attention and from people in the industry so far, a lot of interest. And it's something we've been working on, developing and moving along and trying to get it to the point where somebody will pick it up. But it is the Ghost Orphanage.
The Ghost.
Now just let it breathe, man. The Ghost Orphanage. This man, this story, this IP, this collection of characters, this whole world is.
No, it's like you said, it's one of the ones we've been developing the most. But we gotta tease it for next time because
we gotta tease it a little bit. So this is another great. I'm gonna say great. This is a legendary brainchild of the Abbott. So Steph, please do us the honors, introduce us to the Ghost Orphanage, and tell us about how this goes way back, right?
This goes way back, and that's probably the most I'm going to say about it because I don't want to get too much into it. But it was the Ghost Orphanage. The characters from the Ghost Orphanage are some of the very first characters that I created that would go on to become part of the Creative Extreme multiverse. Literally back in college in 99, 2000, 2001 is when the Ghost Orphanage came to be. And it actually came from a song that I heard. The name of it came from a song. It was this underground Christian hip hop artist. Now, when Christian rap first started, it was the worst stuff ever, right? Like it was literally these guys were like, oh yeah, we want to take our faith and we want to put rap. So it was these real basic raps. Yeah. It was, I grew up on the East Coast. So I was into all of the East Coast rappers, the Bigs, the Wu-Tang, and then some of the West Coast rappers too, the Pacs, the Snoops and Dre's. And those are just
Christian
the popular
rap wasn't
ones.
That wasn't Christian.
Christian rap wasn't that. And it's not because they didn't use profanity like the rappers in the 90s. Yeah. It's because they didn't have no skills. They had no skills.
Real quick. I want to tell a real quick story. One of my exes, when I was a teenager, came from a very religious family. And I remember getting in the car one day and she's like, hey, have you heard of these guys before? And I'm like, no. And so she's like, check this out. So she puts the CD in and it was Christian rap. She's like, what do you think about this? And I was like, I can't. I can't listen to this. And I don't know what I put. I took it out. I put in DMX or Project Pat or something like that. I couldn't do it. But anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no,
Christian rap. That's what makes me think when I immediately go back to that. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
And it was just really basic and really bad in the 90s. Just that. And then this group called Cross Movement came out. And Cross Movement was like, they started out kind of in that corny realm too, but eventually they began to get their skills up and they began to add more members to the crew who had like legitimate rap skills, legitimate MC skills. And they were able to drop a couple of albums and then they were like the Wu-Tang of Christian rap. There was like 10 of them, and then several of them broke out and became megastars on their own, and were actually people who were not necessarily into Christian rap started to respect some of them as MCs. They were like, okay, like, all right,
Yeah,
you
you
know,
can
they got
spit.
skills.
Yeah.
They got their thing. And that was just a little bit before Lecrae came out. Lecrae became, you know,
Yeah.
the greatest Christian rapper of all time, right? And he's been someone again who is now widely respected by the larger hip hop community as like a true MC.
Yeah.
And so anyway, at the time there was these other like underground Christian rappers who were like trying to change the perception of Christian rappers. And it was like, no, I'm telling you, like we're actually like we're from the streets, and you know that was the thing, right? A lot of the first version of the Christian rappers were like these really church
Yeah.
kind of like these, you know, these kids who didn't actually grow up in hip hop culture were just like, oh, I heard a rap song. Now I can make things rhyme
I'm a
all the
rap for
time.
Jesus. Yeah.
I'm a rap for Jesus. He's, you know, stop. So you had these other cats who actually were from hip hop culture and were from the streets, and they started dropping mixtapes. Like they were so like they just started dropping mixtapes, and basically
Yeah.
what they would do is they would take popular hip hop beats and they would sample them the way hip hop DJs did, and they would
Yeah.
rhyme over them the way, you know, rappers were doing, where they would just take popular beats and rhyme over them. And one dude took the Takeover by Jay-Z and rhymed the
Mm.
Jesus rap over it, and it was so dope. It's like he did the Takeover. And so anyway, so there was these two rappers, Corey Red, and what was the other dude's name? It was like Corey Red, and I gotta look it up real quick because I want to get this right. Uh,
Yeah.
but this is where the song came from, or this is where the Corey Red and Precise. Corey Red and Precise did this song called The Matrix, and it was on this mixtape, on this Christian mixtape. I don't even know how I got it. Like I have no idea how I got this tape.
I mean, you were a teenager in the Bronx. That mixtape could have came from anywhere.
Can't get anywhere. And so by the time I got to college, I'm bumping this joint. And in this song, this one of the dudes says, something about an ill metamorphosis, Jesus the Christ snatching your soul out the ghost orphanage. And I was like, yo.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah. There it is.
there was so many layers to that lyric, because a great lyricist throws layers on top of layers, and there's
Yeah.
metaphor and there's simile and there's symbolism. And I was like, dude, just the idea of like, you know, when you are going through your journey of life and you're looking for that answer out there, and so many people, you know, turn to Christianity, and it
Yeah.
becomes that idea, the you know, you know, the idea behind Christianity primarily being you give your life to Christ, and now your soul will end up in heaven rather than hell, right?
Yeah.
And we're not going to get into theology here.
Yeah.
although this story came from that, the idea was that you have all these lost souls on the planet, and the way they become lost souls we will talk about in the next pod. But the ghost orphanage was about these special society, a special society of swordsmen and swordswomen who had these special swords where if they hunted down a ghost orphan, they could liberate the soul and allow it to go to heaven. And then on the other side, you had this other society of swords people who were called the Reapers. The good ones were called the Veil, and the bad ones were called Reapers. And Reapers, just as it would suggest, they would send souls, they would send these lost souls to hell. So that's so just from that one lyric in that song, it spawned an entire, this, like I said, this was back in like 99.
Yeah.
And 25 years later, um, this story, along with, as I wrote it for Project 365. It takes up the whole month of, what is it, May?
Hey,
Takes up
yep.
the whole month of May. And then as you begin to add to it, and as we begin to develop it out and talk about it more, and really, really nail down the mythology of it all, and the historical nature of it all, the spiritual implications of it, how it could just has there's discussions in there about about everything from
Yeah.
the concept of what it means to go to heaven and hell, to
Hmm.
the literalness, the potential literalness of the Bible, to the symbolism of the Bible, to how other faiths and ideas of faith inform different. I mean, it just gets so deep. I mean, just because in general, talking about faith, talking about religion, talking about
Yeah.
Christianity, there's just so much in there
Hmm.
to create, to create stories. Jesus Christ, along with so many other pillars of certain religious sects, was had incredible stories and was an incredible storyteller.
Yeah.
We talk about Jesus, it was all about parables. He told parables, right?
Yeah.
So there's all this, it was always all this symbolism in his stories. And so to be able to kind of dive in, and I think that's a myth. And I'm gonna get on my soapbox for just a second. I know we are way over time, but I'm gonna get on my soapbox for just a second, because a lot of times people look at the entertainment industry as
Hmm.
like this place where, like, heathens and people
Yeah.
who have absolutely no morals and no concept of right and wrong. It's just this place of just pure debauchery.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, there's debauchery in every industry, so including religious industries.
Yes.
So let's just take that. Like, there's bad people and evil people everywhere. But
Yeah.
the more and more that I worked in entertainment, and I'm sure you're seeing this too, there's a ton of people of faith in the
Yeah.
entertainment industry. And I think some of the greatest creators are people who have really wrestled with and examined their connection to their faith. I think some of the greatest creators have really dove in and talk about, what do I believe and
Yeah.
how do I translate my core religious or moral values, and how do I create an artistic story to explore that and
Yeah.
express that. I
Yeah.
think that faith offers so much opportunity for storytelling,
Hmm.
and that there are a lot of people of faith who are doing high level creative stuff,
Yeah.
um, because that wasn't always the case or the perception
Yeah.
outside of, like, some like gospel music and a lot of contemporary Christian music. That for a long time, those were like the only things that were, it felt like there was being a lot of artistic, in
Hmm.
painting, right? We had like the Sistine Chapel, and like a lot of those things where we had like painting. And now, when film started, at first it started out as like proselytizing. It's like, oh, we're going to use film to bring more people
Yeah.
to to believe what we believe, which is, do what you got to do. But then I think it became so much more where we're going to like tell symbolic stories and give things people to wrestle with, because we're wrestling with, you know, faith and religion are not easy things to nail down.
Yeah.
We try to simplify them to make it like, yo, just believe. It's that simple, and it's not
Yeah.
that simple for anybody, And
Yeah.
anybody who tells you that it is that simple, I have questions.
Well, and you said some very, 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 very profound things.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I know. I went
And
on. This is way.
no, but like it's great because first thing I want to say is what you made me think of, right? People always say, "Oh, the entertainment industry is filled with hedonistic heathens and all this other stuff," right? It's all over the place. It's not just the entertainment industry, like you said. It's also in religious establishments, right? Because we're all human. Everybody's
Mhm.
human. and humans aren't perfect. It's like, what did God tell Cain? He said something like, he was like, you invited something into yourself that goes against who you are and what's
Mhm.
right. And sin
Yeah.
crouches out. This part was kind of bugged me out. But sin crouches outside of your door like a sexually
Mm.
aroused predator, and you invited it in to have its way with you. Like that, yo, you want to talk about great storytelling. If I'm sitting out writing a story, if I could ever pen something like that, yeah, I can't pen God's word, but that, I heard that, and I was just like, yo. But it wasn't because he was in the entertainment industry. He wasn't. That's just human nature, right? We're all
Yeah.
susceptible to temptation into these things. And so that I think ties into what you said later was, it's not you can't it's a very faith in religion and in human beings, that whole relationship, it's extremely complex, right? But I think the reason why it makes for great storytelling is because it's all about a journey. It's about a quest.
Mm.
Everybody loves a story about adventure, and this is just a different type of adventure when you get into faith and the relationship between men, women, human beings, kids, whatever it is, and God or gods and faith and belief and all that kind of stuff. And so it'll just perfectly lends itself to story, to entertainment,
Yeah.
because that, in my mind and in my opinion, that's the ultimate quest, the ultimate journey, the ultimate adventure is, navigating faith and your human experience in this world and in this life. So all you just made me think about all like extremely profound stuff you were saying, and it lends itself to a much more massive and even greater conversation, which we could talk about forever.
Yeah, yeah. We
But
might have
again,
just birthed a whole nother podcast
yeah, a
episode.
whole other pod. But say all that to say, everything we just talked about, that's in the Ghost Orphanage. And that's why Ghost Orphanage is one of the greatest freaking stories and worlds I've ever come across.
Oh,
Also, is reason why I got to thank you again. I feel like I got to thank you every single pod
yeah.
because you allowed me to inject some of my craziness and my imagination into that world. And because it's rare when you have such a rich, such a layered, such a dynamic and great world of story and character, a lot of people don't want to let anybody else in
Yeah.
that sandbox
Very
to play.
protective. Yeah.
The only time they might is if a studio comes with a bag and says, we're going to handle writing and developing it, but you're going to get paid, right? And then the creator will be like, oh, okay, yeah, here you go.
Here you go. Yeah.
Thanks for the bag. I'm going to go retire somewhere and, or whatever, like my royalties. But you allowed me to come into that sandbox, into that world. And just like I said, inject some of my craziness in there, man. Some of my own stories that I've wanted to tell
Dude.
based off of faith and religion and, the agnostic gospels and the Dead Sea Scrolls and all these kind of fringe, scriptures and things like that have always intrigued me. You allowed me to come in and bring that in and tie that into what you were doing. And we rolled together to develop the story even more. So thank you, because that's a rare
Dude.
opportunity I feel in this space to be able to be a fan of a story and a world and characters like that you created, for me to be a fan of that, and then also to be able to write and be a part of that. Man, that was incredible.
Dude. And then the layers that you added were just, added so much more richness, so much more, like you said, some craziness. Because me, I'm always pushing, like, how can we make it a little crazier? How can we make it a little bit crazier? How can we make it just a little bit more while still keeping within, the things that make sense and that thematically
Yeah.
make sense? But how can we make it crazier? And yeah, so man, I think this has been like now like a 20-minute teaser. We're trying to.
You got to deliver
It's just
now.
supposed to be- it's
You got to
supposed to be
deliver.
like
If we
30
don't
seconds.
deliver with the Ghost Orphanage, man, we're done. People are
They're
gonna
gonna-
leave us forever.
So, oh my
No, but it's
gosh.
great stuff.
Anyway, well, yes. Well, thank you. Like, yeah, it's good. It's good to be able to have these, this creative connection that we can continue making stuff together.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been good, and it's going to continue to be good. It's fun. So,
So for all y'all
but
out
like you
there,
said, yeah, go ahead.
for all y'all out there, if you don't want to wait till the next pod, go to www.thecreativeextreme.com. Go to the month of May. It starts with Virginia Ice. Dive in, get to reading. You're going to go through the Ghost Orphanage. You're going to go through the dense, rich, historic lore and everything, and it'll take you all the way through the end, through the Age of Serpents. But check it out, then come back to the next pod so you can have your own thoughts about what we're talking about. Or if you just want to wait to the next pod for us to talk about it, that's cool. It might be the next 2 pods because I'm telling you, this really deep.
It is.
But yeah, go check it out. And if you want to see something new on your streaming services, if you want to see something original that really goes there and takes storytelling to heart, reach out to your local your local cable companies. Tell them to contact thecreativeextreme.com and work with us so we can develop and produce this series and bring it to you so you can enjoy it in your homes. Hopefully, Lord willing, everything will come through and you'll be seeing it on your screens one day very soon. But wrapping it up, this has been another episode of the Abbott and the Artista. Again, I'm Christopher Ikpo, aka the Artista with.
And I'm Stefan Thomas, aka the Abbott.
All right, y'all. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Peace.